Hello again, Sandwich. I'm Greg Anderson. Welcome back to another edition of Ask the Supt. It is great to have you here. We are in the month of February as we tape this. We're doing it every month. First thing I got to say is thank you for those of you who are sending your questions in. The whole intent behind this is to bring conversation from the superintendent to you. Though there are many ways to do it, you can call the guy, but there's an avenue here for us to take your questions, thought out questions, send them in to us. We have a discussion and give a different perspective. So thank you for those of you who are sending your questions in to ask our superintendent at gmail.com. So here we are, Dr. Joe, good to see you again.
Great seeing you, Greg.
So the days are getting longer.
They are, thank God. And
exactly.
climate change, 61 degrees as I'm driving in this morning. It's amazing.
It's beautiful. And that means we're getting closer to spring.
It does.
Means we're getting closer to the end of the school year. You're going to be on the beach in about, no time.
That's definitely wishful thinking, but yeah, we have a little bit more of winter and then spring to get through. But today, this week, as a matter of fact, Greg, was High Holy Day at Forestdale, the 100th day celebration.
Oh, wow.
So great to see kindergartners, first graders, second graders celebrating 100 days of school.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of a snapshot as we're definitely progressing through now the second semester of school.
And kindergartners,
They're awesome.
They celebrate.
They're awesome.
It's about playing and all of that. So when you build a celebration around them, they really
absolutely. It's everything school should be, particularly with respect to just joy of learning for learning's sake.
One of the questions that we're going to ask is about gyms and all of that. So we're going to get there in a second. But when you look at, as a superintendent, how do you assess whether or not your kids in your school district are getting enough exercise out there, heart pumping? There was recess, and then there's gym and athletics. But what's not the grade on you guys, but how does one assess whether or not kids are getting enough fresh air and playtime?
Sure, I think it's multiple measures. You first and foremost, you take a look at the data. You take a look at the data as far as the number of minutes, particularly for our younger kids that are outside during recess. You compare it to how other schools, how other districts, how much they're actually offering kids. You take a look at the data with regard to physical education, the number of minutes and so on. But then I think there's also the qualitative piece as far as asking and surveying. For our kids at the middle high school, we will be administering this pretty comprehensive survey known as the Panorama Survey that kind of speaks to social emotional learning and also health and health habits. And part of that is going to be explicit about how kids are, how physically active they are, and then the correlation to their self-esteem and how they're feeling about themselves, how they're feeling about their body image, and so on.
Yeah.
So I think taking those multiple measures, those different data sets, gives you the full picture of how we're doing in that area.
Well, and as we've been seeing in the news recently, there's a lot of mental health issues.
Absolutely.
These horrific situations that are happening in Massachusetts, not to mention around the country and world. That whole focus on, are we okay? Are we all right? All right. And I know we've talked about that in the past as it relates to keeping an eye on the students who may be living in a very troubled home life situation. So that's a moving target for you. And then you have an incident that may happen, God forbid, and that then forces you to kind of assess, how we're doing. But you don't quite know until something unfortunately happens.
Sure. And it's interesting that you bring up that point because the last 6 or 7 weeks, a good chunk of my responsibility has been crafting and presenting the FY24 budget, the budget for next school year.
Yeah.
And the district has made a significant investment in social emotional learning and also in mental health. And I'm very comfortable with the staffing that we have in our schools, folks like social workers. At the elementary level, we actually have as an elective, social emotional learning, where things like coping skills are explicitly taught to our kids. But I think when push comes to shove, the heart of the matter is having a special classroom culture and environment, and then the bigger picture, the school culture, where our staff know our kids and know them well and connect with families and know what's going on in the home, not in this overly invasive way, but it's really about creating that extended family culture. I think we do a very, very good job at that, and that is the proactive stuff. That's the preventive stuff that helps kind of avoid one of those God forbid type situations.
When I work in the healthcare space, and there are people who are nurses and doctors or even certified nursing assistants who work in assisted living communities and the like, they're not the highest paid jobs.
No.
But they do the hardest work. And I put teachers in that same category.
Absolutely.
They're not the highest paid, but you also don't do it unless you really care.
Of course.
So that's a pile of people that we have in the school system that you are really leading the charge for. And they are well-minded, well-meaning. They care about kids. They are looking out for the best interest. I mean, we all had those teachers that's like, oh my gosh, if she wants to wrap my knuckles one more time, it's that teacher. But I feel like the teachers I know, particularly the ones that are in the sandwich school system, you got some really good teachers.
Absolutely. And, I've been saying this for 33 years. You don't go into this business, oh, gee, I want to become rich. By no means.
Exactly.
You do it because it's a higher calling. It's a vocation. It's not just a job or just a career. I consider it to be next level, that if you are really, really good at your craft, there's a certain passion and there's a certain commitment that goes to it. And, right before I drove here, I was doing walkthroughs with Jim Mulcahy, the principal at the high school. And, we're kind of bopping back and forth between, I visited an 8th grade Algebra 1 class, and then I went to a AP US History class on the high school side, and just seeing, those two teachers and the heart and soul that they give to their kids, not only in the passion for teaching the content, but also connecting with kids and being able to diagnose if a kid is struggling and so on. It's a sacred bond, not to kind of sound melodramatic or corny about it, but we're in the people business. We're not in a business where we're creating widgets or, there's a bottom line. And that's what makes our business so special.
Yeah. Excellent. You have had some, changing the subject, you have had some recent physical plant issues, Forestdale.
It was an interesting weekend.
Oak Ridge, I know. Tell me what, have there been any physical plant lessons learned from this whole experience? Not necessarily with these schools, but does it kind of bring a bigger picture to your mind? Or are you really just, is this just a Forestdale and Oak Ridge?
Well, you've got to be proactive, and again, I'll give my predecessor, Dr. Gould, a lot of credit, along with the school committee. You've got to keep that ongoing investment in facilities, and I know under Pam's leadership, there was a real turnaround in investing in facilities after many, many years of deferred maintenance. Unfortunately, last weekend, as folks probably know, we had just off the charts historical cold. And as a result, we had a couple burst pipes at Forestdale and one at Oak Ridge. And as a result, really the bigger issue was at Forestdale with respect to 13 classrooms being affected. Unfortunately, I had to cancel school for Forestdale this past Monday, and we've had, between our maintenance staff and service master, come in to take care of remediation of a lot of damage, because unfortunately those water pipes were to the sprinkler system, so therefore, as a result, there was considerable water damage to classrooms. Part of that, honestly, is the way, the structure that those two buildings built in, I think, like 1989, 90, where unfortunately you have some pipes that don't have sufficient insulation around them. So we're trying to address that at this point. But I think just staying on top of having a regular cycle for upgrades. For example, in Forestdale and Oak Ridge, you've got carpeting in classrooms that's upwards of 20 to 30 years old.
Wow.
It's not good, you know.
That's seen generations of families go on top of that one carpet.
So, you know, one of my priorities is going to be, okay, as we did in my previous school district of Mendon Upton, of having kind of a cycle of saying, okay, for Forestdale, we're going to tackle this wing of 12 classrooms, and we're going to have carpet replacement. Or, you know, I get feedback from our principals around, hey, can we do a little more with regard to just painting upgrades and having a cycle for that? So having, yes, a capital improvement plan is important, but also having that cyclical nature for set upgrades that you're doing during the summer months is extremely important.
And to be clear, what happened at these two schools was cold related.
Oh, absolutely.
It was not deferred maintenance.
No.
All of a sudden it snapped.
But when you're, you know, literally on Tuesday, myself and our new facilities director, Chris George, were meeting with our insurance adjuster. And, you know, seeing, okay, these are the things that got damaged, that potentially have mold damage. You start getting into that mode of thinking, okay, we've got to have more of a cycle of, you know, upfront maintenance that we really commit to, and we kind of plant the stake firmly in the ground.
Right, got it. Okay, let me ask these questions now, Joe. I have made a conscious decision I was looking at these emails that come in, and some of them have statements, some of them they're all questions, but a lot of them have context around them.
Sure.
I could have skimmed it down and just gone to the question, but I do feel that there's a benefit to understanding the context behind what people are saying. So you're okay with the full question?
Sure.
This is one full question, but no, I'm kidding. It's not. That's not the case. Okay, here's one question. I saw Dr. Maruszczak at the Program of Studies night at Sandwich High School earlier this week, which reminded me of your program, our program, and questioned a question. I actually had a draft email to him and others about an event Dr. Joe and the athletic director attended. I thought it would be a good question for your program. Thank you for thinking of us. Early in December, both the superintendent and athletic director tweeted that they attended an event in Boston with Maura Healey, who was the Attorney General at that time, MIAA, and others, titled Addressing Hate in School Sports. Those tweets led to these questions. There are three of them. One, what was the goal of the program and what were the takeaways from it? Were student athletes or a world of difference peer leaders invited to attend? Why or why not? And how is this information going to be shared with our students?
Great questions. So the event was held in early December, sponsored by the MIAA, the Massachusetts Interscholastic Athletic Association. And it was an event strictly for superintendents, high school principals, and athletic directors. Unfortunately, it was also the same time that we had a NEASC or accreditation visit happening at the high school. So therefore, that's why Jim Mulcahy, our principal, couldn't attend. But myself and athletic director Neil Murphy went. It was a great program. I think one of the questions is related to the students. I believe the MIAA is holding a follow-up event for student athlete leaders. You know, so think about things like team captains and so on, for for Sandwich High School to have the same type of event. I think it was spurned by some of the things that you've seen in communities vis-a-vis, think about Duxbury with the problems that they've had with the football team, with the anti-Semitism, Danvers hockey scandal, and so on. And the content was around the proactive pieces of what you would do with regard to meetings with student athletes, their parents, family members, but also the student leadership piece as far as the messaging that you should be having. Part of it is around complete, no tolerance for inappropriate statements, inappropriate behavior, but also stressing the pro-social behaviors. So there's that piece, but then there's also, unfortunately, the reactive piece when there is a crisis. And again, I think I just saw literally 2 days ago a problem in Wellesley where there was a basketball game between Wellesley and Weymouth, and people in the stands, screaming racist things at the Weymouth players. How you would work in that type of crisis between two districts and two schools to make sure that you're on the same page and sending a clear message to the community and the larger community about how this is unacceptable.
So if there were takeaways specific to one of the questions, give us a couple of key takeaways that you had from that event.
It starts early. It starts early, starting with students in elementary grades, starting with middle school students. This is something that's much, much larger than just an athletic problem. Again, athletics in schools are a microcosm of society. So when you see hate on the rise in society, you're probably also going to see it in schools. So I think about things like, the ADL World of Difference program and the student ambassadors that we have at the high school. You've got to continue to invest in that type of programming. You have to continue to even bring that down to Oak Ridge and to younger students in having a consistent message and consistent programming around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and against anti-hate speech and actions and so on.
Yeah, got it. Okay, good. Next question. Can the town school gyms, including the wing school, be open more often during non-school days for the kids K through 8 to play basketball more often? There are many weekends and vacations in the winter where it would be nice to have an open gym in Sandwich instead of going to the Hyannis Youth Center. The person writing this says, I understand this would cost extra to pay someone to monitor, but the kids in Sandwich deserve better playgrounds and indoor gym time if possible. Thoughts on that?
I think it's a great point, and that question makes me speak to what I'd like to be rolling out in the coming weeks as far as just surveying families about how much of a need is this. We could do it, we can budget it, we can figure it out. I think as the author of that question points out, we generally need to have, when we have an open gym, we need to have somebody monitor and custodial help to look after it. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility, but I would also want to know how much demand is out there. We're going to be working with the town to put something out into the community around the pool. Okay, so we've had speakers during public comment at the school committee meeting. I've had people, I'm grabbing a coffee at Beth's in the village and, hey Joe, what's the deal with the pool? And I've gotten that more than once. And I know it's been challenging. I know it's been very much a political issue, but we're trying to assess, okay,
What's the need?
what's the need? Are we talking a dozen people, or are we talking 200 people?
Right.
Really want to see the community use of the pool, would like to see these types of programming like water aerobics or whatever.
Yeah.
We need to ascertain and get a better handle on what exactly do people want.
And the pool comes with historical controversy.
I've had more than one person share their opinions with me on that.
All right. Okay, next question. Enrollment in Sandwich Public Schools continues to decline, a 53% decrease since FY02, according to this viewer.
Sure.
A full 36% of pre-K through grade 12 students seek educational opportunities outside Sandwich. Meanwhile, 63 cents on every dollar goes to school-related costs. First of all, is the math correct there?
It's probably pretty accurate, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, yeah.
So the question then is, how do we restore some balance? Is now the time to take a hard look at a regional school system?
Great questions, and yeah, answer that in 50 words or less, please.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Have you finished answering it yet?
really, I would say first and foremost, you have to work on strengthening your program and retaining the kids that we have. It's really a two-pronged thing. The reality is the birth rate has declined in the community since FY02. And then also less families are moving into Sandwich, and it's hardly a surprise. Sandwich is not. Sandwich is an expensive community to move into, and I can say firsthand, looking for homes on the market right now.
Right.
So that is a real challenge. But I also go back to, and I think we discussed it, really two main buckets: looking at academic rigor, and then also customer service, as far as that follow through, that proactive communication with our families, and so on. So my big focus and attention is looking at that 8th grade to 9th grade transition and retaining more kids. So no, I don't think we're going to go back to the early 2000s where we had over 3,000 kids, pre-K through 12 in this district. But I do think we need to do more work on retaining our kids and ensuring that our families have a high degree of confidence in the school district. The second piece with respect to regionalization, I think anything is in the realm of possibility, but you got to also have to have a dance partner who is looking at that piece of, hey, we really want to save money, and we are also a good fit to connect with this community. Now, could I very flippantly say, hey, yeah, you know what? We should be regionalizing with Mashpee and Bourne. That totally makes sense. Okay. But that has got to be, a very comprehensive look at, what are the enrollment projections? What is the financial viability of each community? Then also the logistical issues around things like transportation, facilities, and all that stuff.
And we could dilute a very successful school system,
or vice versa.
Yeah.
And so, in the midst of the recession, before I came on board in my previous district, Mendon Upton, in 2010. Mendon Upton is a school district very similar demographically, also numbers about 2,200 kids in those two communities. And next door is this small little community called Hopedale, which has all of maybe 1,100, 1,200 students. So it was kind of like, do you take 3 towns and make that a regional school district? And they did probably about an 18-month study and ended up saying, thanks, but no thanks. And
Hopedale did.
Yes.
Yeah.
But there was mixed reactions
Sure.
in Mendon and Upton. And a lot of times it's finances, but a lot of times it's also politics
Yeah.
and so on. In New England, we do things a lot of extremely well, but let's be honest, we're also very parochial. We're very provincial.
Yeah.
There's a lot of little things like, hey, you know what? My parents were Blue Knights. We've always been this way.
Yeah.
And so on. There's a lot of community pride as well. So
Right.
is it in the realm of possibility? Absolutely. But I think it would also be something that would have to take years of study and looking
Right.
at it in a very comprehensive manner.
And you coming from a regional school system, you understand what it's like on that side.
Yeah,
as well
and
as this. So
honestly,
you get the perspective.
there's pros and cons. There's things about a regional school district that I genuinely miss as far as a lot of the autonomy. But there's also things that being connected here to the town makes my life a lot easier. It's a lot easier dealing with one community and one set of select board and FinComs versus two,
Yeah.
and so on. So there's pros and cons to everything.
Got it. I'm curious, the attendance of the public at school committee meetings, how would you rate that? Are you guys getting good audiences?
Generally, no.
Yeah.
Does
Does that bother you?
You always want to see more engagement.
Yeah.
And I think Sandwich is no different than most communities in that people will come out when there's a crisis or there's a hot button
Right.
item. But you always want to have more public engagement and public input rather than less.
Yeah, got it. All right, we have asked our questions. I'm going to tell you again, thank you so much for sending in your questions to the superintendent. It is askoursuperintendent@gmail.com. The last thing I want to say to you, Joe, is you kind of took it on the chin and really took a blow on this whole communicating to the town about the roads and all of that. I have to say, with a PR background, it's really nice to see someone own it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
It really is.
I mean, I think just being honest and being transparent
Yeah.
about what your thought process was and so on, I think it's just being your authentic self.
Yeah.
And there's things that I do incredibly well. There's some things that, my wife always says to me, not every single day is going to be an A+ day. And
Yeah.
I think owning and being responsible and being honest is
Now,
what it's all about.
If you didn't handle it well, I would have asked you about it. You know that. But no, and I've always thought, geez, you get those phone calls in the middle of the morning, early morning from the superintendent, you think, what is it that they're learning? And who do they learn from?
Sure.
And what's the pacing and the timing of all of that? Because you get up early these days to get your kids out to school. So I think you handled it well. I don't have kids in the school system, but I appreciate it just from I guess I would say from a PR perspective.
Sure.
Joe, thank you much.
Thank you.
We will see you next month.
I will be here.
There's a lot going on. My friends, thank you again for watching, and I hope this is helpful, and I hope it is another avenue for you to learn a little bit of perspective from our superintendent and therefore the school system. I'm Greg Anderson. I will see you next time.